Hello, my name's Ian Danby, the director of the Burton at Bideford, and I'm here with Roop Johnstone, who's the creator of BellHouse. Welcome. So the installations are absolutely fantastic and will capture people's imagination. How did you get into ceramics?
So I started it when I was at school. I was about 14. I was an amazing teacher, and I fell in love. I got the bug, started making pots, and just went, this is what I want to do. So then I went to art college in Edinburgh, and I've been working since then, either in a teaching context or as a kind of self-employed potter artist.
So after leaving college, you set up your ceramics practice, Ramp. Tell us how that came about.
So after college, I worked for a couple of years in a school, and then I got together with my now wife Alice, and we were living in London, and we decided to start working together, and so set up Ramp in a place called Cockpit Arts in Deptford, and that was in 2001. So we've been working together since then, making pots and selling them at craft fairs and in galleries around the country.
And you still work together on various projects, but this one is specifically for you. Is this specifically your project?
Yeah, very much so. So Ramp is the mainstay of our practice together, and then we both do kind of individual projects. This being one of my projects, but Alice also does other work too. So that's how we work together in that sense.
And how did this project come about? Because obviously it's quite a departure from the ceramics, which we stock here in the gallery anyway, and then this is just such a departure involving more technology.
For the last sort of 10 years, I've been working at the college in Exeter and teaching on the foundation course. And one of the things that we got involved with, part of my teaching is in 3D and part actually in fashion and textiles. And we got involved in a hackathon at the Met Office, and they were looking for students to help them make concrete objects from that kind of open-ended problem-solving process, which is what a hackathon is. And so we were bringing students in, and got really excited with the idea that students can art students in particular, have a really important role to play in that kind of collaborative process. And it got me involved with working with the scientists and technologists at the Met Office. And I got really excited and it brought back a sort of series of ideas that I'd had a long time ago, kind of 10, 15 years before that, about being able to make sounds with pots. And eventually in 2016, a commission call out came from the Met Office, or from Collider, which is a production studio in Exeter, who were commissioning a kind of playable sculpture for a European climate science organisation called EUPORIAS. And it felt like a really amazing opportunity to regenerate this idea. It came straight back to me that I wanted to make something. And I could see how the technological understanding of and abilities of a lot of the scientists and engineers at the Met Office might help me to realise this project.
And in terms of your interest in sort of climate change and the environment, obviously it's quite a deeply seated belief, and do you find that this has a new dimension and a new urgency to our thinking on climate change?
Well, what I did learn from all those experiences with the Met Office originally was that the Met Office is like a huge library of information. They generate unthinkable amounts of data from all over the world all the time, and with huge amounts of expertise about how to generate that into information which helps us understand climate and what's going on in that respect. But one thing is how does an organisation like that communicate that information to the public in a way where it's understandable and maybe helps us to kind of reimagine and change our behaviour. And that's something that's really interesting to me, because that's a kind of really good way in for us as artists and creative people to help them do that.
And also help audiences understand.
Yeah, help audiences understand that. And I suppose the thing about BellHouse is that really it comes in at a slightly different angle, which is to help also the scientists that create that information to think about how they are communicating with the public, because it's such a specific and set of kind of understandings, a specific language, such in-depth research that even for people with like qualifications and so on and so forth and real expertise in that area, often it can be quite hard to understand what's being said. And so really what BellHouse is about is playing that information back to those scientists, to help them really rethink in some ways, or just consider what that information is and how they can understand, how they can help other people understand it further. So in a sense what it's doing is playing that through a different kind of medium, so allowing them to hear their data, and then in that sense hopefully speak to them about how us as novices and people without that information might hear the original data.
Yeah. In terms of obviously your work sitting in, as we are now in the collection that we have, or some of the collection, we've also asked you to curate some of your key pieces, which is really fascinating to know. How does our collection sort of fit in with the work that you do? So obviously you've known our collection for a long time.
Yeah, so I think the data is, I mean, the pots in the gallery they're fascinating because, I mean, you know, one of the things I love about ceramics is that it has a tradition that goes back for as long as there's been a civilization, and that in Devon there's a really long tradition of making pots for use because the materials are here, and that at various points in the kind of history that's been a really significant source of income and trade for this part of the world. I've lived in Devon for over 15 years, and I've been involved with the collection in one way or another for quite a lot of that time. And although I didn't know much about it when I was training and so on and so forth, I've come to learn about it and really appreciate the value of it. Again, it's about, you know, a lot of these pots, even the very simplest pots, but also the harvest jugs and so on, are part of that kind of ritual where they have use, but they are used in particular kind of rituals which give them meaning, and that's a really important thing in my work, in the sense that we make pots and they have a visual aesthetic, but actually one of the really important things about them is in the use of them. That adds an extra dimension to how we appreciate them, that we might use that harvest jug in a special ceremony after the harvest to share our thanks and celebration for the bringing in of the harvest. That's a really important kind of part of that. And you know, things like the wassail jugs and so on, all of those have a really important kind of aspect, and that's what brings meaning to them. It's also the fact that they were made by kind of ordinary people, which I think is really just
fascinating. Yeah, and in terms of sort of your pots, these are obviously ones made by hand by you, and they also have some sculptural significance, and they're also functional. And in this context, they are entirely out of context, I suppose, in some ways. One of the things you mentioned to me earlier, which I really liked, was the fact that some of this comes out of a slightly failed firing.
Yeah, so when I was at college, we used to have a thing where we used to make pots to sell, to raise money to pay for our materials. We used to have to pay for our materials every year, and so we used to have a Christmas sale and a summer sale, and I made a huge bunch of pots for one of these sales and put them in a kiln, and the glaze hadn't come out as I wanted it, and I was a bit frustrated. And so I had like 20 or 30 pots on my desk, and I was sort of annoyed, and I was sort of tapping them, just going, what am I going to do with these pots? And I realised that actually quite a few of them made some kind of nice sounds, and I was like, oh, okay. So I went out and I bought like a percussion mallet, and I just started playing them, and I thought about having some sort of orchestra or something like that at that point, but I didn't have the kind of financial resources or the sort of technological know-how. I was thinking about typewriters and lots of levers and pulleys and things. And so the idea sort of just sat dormant until
BellHouse emerged.
Came. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right.